Thank you for joining us at this late afternoon hour. We have a focus on producers that we're going to be, kind of guessing how you guys do it all with balancing all the difficulties that come across when the systems are changing, and we also want to be concerned and care about the people because it is a people business after all. So I'd like to welcome Zach Tim from Deadline. He will introduce this panel. I'd like to thank our colleagues and partners at ACE Producers and the Association of Producers in Audiovisual from the Czech Republic, who have also contributed and will help us spread this word by sharing this video with their networks. Enjoy the panel. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Hugo. Hi, I'm Zach. I'm a journalist from Deadline, and like Hugo said, I'm going to be moderating this panel about producers. It's like I was just in here before listening to them talking about like intimacy coordinators, and the last sort of answer was like one of the intimacy coordinators talking about how in the future she really wants the industry to become more aware of the lives that people who work in cinema have. How can we have sort of sustainable lives while giving our everything to the creation, which was really a great way to lead into this panel, because I think that's what we're going to be talking a lot about. So I have three really great experienced producers from working across the world, and it's probably best for them to explain who they are and explain what they do, and then we can get started. Would you like to start?
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Marek Novák. I'm from Ksuva Film Production Company based here in the Czech Republic, in Prague. And I've had the pleasure to work on co-productions in the region, but also slightly outside of it. I've worked with Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about the challenges and also joys of our work, I hope.
Hello, I'm Joanna Szymańska. I'm a Polish producer from Warsaw-based company called Shipsboy, and I'm here wearing many hats, not only a co-producer and producer, but also I am the deputy chair of European Film Academy, so I can share a bit of insights into the work of the Academy as a network, which I think also will be a topic of this conversation. And speaking about the experience, I guess I'm in my 20th year as a producer, and I've worked with a variety of countries and partners from UK, Germany to Czech, Slovakia. So I'll be happy to share that with you as well.
Hi, my name is Raffaello Vignoli. I'm Italian by my name, but I'm based in New York. I have a production company in US and in Italy, and I use as a bridge between two very different cultures, Americans and Italians. And I have experience working with studios, indie production, and I use my company in Italy to work with European productions to open my business with European.
Awesome. I mean, the really interesting thing about this is obviously you all work for production companies, ones that you founded, ones that you work within, and you've been doing that for many years. So what class is an independent producer now? If you're kind of working, like what does that mean? You know,
a gambler.
Gambler, yeah.
Yes, in life and in business in a way. I mean, definitely you need to love what you're doing, because you never know. You can even have a green light with a distribution behind. I have a friend of mine that is producing in Hungary, and suddenly a few weeks before starting prep with a major actress, she fell, and you cannot start production. So it's really how you want to live your life, and this is part of the reason I think why we are doing this, because you can decide to work with the studio if you can to make some money, but for indie producer like us, you need to love what you do in the story, the director, because it's a marriage, and I think through this business, even as being a producer, you can even discover yourself little by little, because you face so many people that kind of mirroring you. I don't want to get into too psychological, but I think you need to be something like that to understand the other person.
Well, I think from my perspective is, as I shared earlier preparing for this panel, I'm sure you're all familiar with this game Floor is Lava. So I think we are a bit in that stage that it's playful but dangerous as well. And I would say that independent producers, from my perspective, are first and foremost entrepreneurs. really, and they really have to be entrepreneurial very much, because it's not only about making art or making films, but it's also about creating a company that's sustainable, that's long-lasting, that it's giving jobs and can perform beyond this next project, but really to build a stable company that is long-going. I think entrepreneurial element of this job is really important.
Yes, I think that's very well said. I will maybe follow up with more trivial commentary, or like what my thought was, that it's just about figuring out stuff and and getting excited. But yes, entrepreneurial is much more precise. I feel that yeah, it's about getting excited ourselves about stories and people we work with, then figuring out everything all the time, because there is never a clean way towards our goal, and making other people excited in the end and being able to do it on a long term.
You mentioned there's never a clean way, and I think the number one thing I always hear about in my travels, and even earlier when you guys were speaking, is money. That's the thing that makes this job so precarious sometimes. And I wondered, how has that challenge shaped your careers? The choices that you made creatively, the projects that you've tried to do, and the lives that you've been able to live. How has that, shaped the things that you do?
I can take this one. Well, for me, this is very ironical, but when I established my company almost 20 years ago, money was the last thing I was thinking about in terms of earning money, and I never really, until I don't know, 3-4 years ago, really figured it out that it actually is a business. And of course, the financial landscape these days, especially after COVID, has changed dramatically. And I think that, and it's not only about new players coming in, streamers, etc., but it's also about, I would say, a general attitude towards supporting arts and culture, that funding and financing projects has become very competitive. And it also became, in my perspective, somehow detached from the quality of the project, really. And I think that's what makes our job so intense these days, is that we really, as Marek just said, we really need to be very, very excited about something, but then we also need to have a lot of persistence to actually go and find these partners, not only locally, but also globally. Because paradoxically, I mean, there's a lot of money in the market, but not specifically for at least the types of films or shows I would like to do, that are slightly maybe more challenging to the audiences or elevate underrepresented voices. So I think it's also, in terms of financing, it also shapes the profile of the company in a way. And I'm working on a PhD at Łódź Film School, which examines exactly that, like how financial restraints are changing and challenging producers' development slates. Do we basically end up developing and producing stuff we can finance because money is there for specific type of content, or do we find creative ways to finance what we really want to produce? I haven't written the PhD yet, so I don't have any answers, but I'll be happy to hear your comments, guys, on this.
It's great to hear that you are doing a PhD about this topic. I think it's very important, and it has very profound influence on what kind of stories get made. I also once thought of making a PhD about this. I'm glad that I didn't get there yet.
I'll share the results.
Because I think it's a lot of work, because it's a very, very deep topic. And yes, I think the money situation, on the long term especially, how does it influence who can actually eventually be able to do this work, which can at times be very precarious, and it's more and more competitive. I'm sure it has been like this always, but it feels that the tempo of changes and the need to adaptation feels very fast and only accelerating. So the financial situation has a huge impact on our possibilities of doing that, and the stories which eventually then tell to each other. But at the same time, I am still very glad being from the Czech Republic. I think we have a very comfortable, relatively, if I look into the region or around system and active industry, and I feel good about it, I would say, yeah.
I mean, working in US, which is very different than financing system in Europe, and being able to work with indie projects, with bond companies, and see even with Netflix, we did a Charlie Kaufman movie, you see the difference about having soft money that could be a leverage to film in Europe, and the American money that sometimes, or you have a studio behind, or streamer, or you have some financiers that they just want to invest in the movie knowing that it's not the best investment, because you need to be tied to the story, to the director, and willing to work with some producer that hopefully you get the best working with you and clean and clear to explain you how the movie business works. Because for some of them it's, yes, financiers to invest, but it's even to go to festival, to be part of something that in their life if they invest, I don't know, in steel or in technology, they are not able to do it, and that's the United States. Europe having this system that it's really good, because theoretically it should help the artists to tell what they want to say by using the public money, but the bureaucracy behind that, we know it's challenging because it takes so much time, and the project now are getting made so fast that maybe you have a story that 7 years ago took 7 years to make, and maybe was right at the time and not now. So for me, being in US, I moved there in 2010, I thought, how can I be unique in a way? And I thought, okay, I'd be the bridge between Italy, Europe, and US, and not being another American producer. And understanding how things get made, or not made sometimes in Italy, or things get made in US, it's even, you position as a producer, even as an ambassador, to explain to the American system how things get made in another part of the world, and the same for the other. Because my first project in US was with Paolo Sorrentino, and I remember he was the producer at the time. I was at the beginning of my career. They were smart enough to bring the HOD from Italy. So they create an environment next to Paolo, kind of to protect him, because then when you jump in a system like the American one, which is just, you have union, you have rules, you have rates, you can be Paolo Sorrentino, you can be anyone else, it's work for them. Yeah. Anyways, our role of a producer is to protect the idea, but you were asking about money, so hopefully I answered somehow.
No, it's really interesting. I want to come back to the US context more in a bit, because it's so specific. Specifically, the New York context, which you work in, I guess it's really different to the Los Angeles context also. But like, just quickly to ask, how many producers are in here, or like people who want to produce? Can you put your hand up? Okay, cool. So we can ask like very detailed questions, but Joanna, you posed the question like, do you just make things that you can get made, or do you come up with creative solutions? But you're all here, Marek. You have like 4 films here, like, so so you guys are coming up with creative solutions. So like, can you give some like concrete creative solutions that you've used throughout your career that maybe some of the audience could find useful?
I think what I did, and I'm trying to do, is to be diverse, but still true to what I want to do. And by that I mean I had the pleasure of working with Netflix on one project. I worked on several children films, and now I'm working on a very author-driven art house adaptation of a poetic novel. So, but they are all somehow in line with my sensibility and with the stories I want to put on the screen, and the stories I feel responsible about, in a way. But also, being super honest, it's having side jobs that support you and the company in the times when maybe there's a slightly drier period. Like doing line production for other productions, but also support from programs like media. I think I can't really stress enough how important it is to have that ability to apply to media and have a slate funding that allows you to focus on 2-3 projects rather than just go from, one gig to another. We are now trying to convince Polish Film Institute to also maybe include a slate funding, because what we are hearing more and more, I wonder if you guys can share this too, but what I'm hearing more and more is that funding productions case by case, project by project, has become very unsustainable because, as you said, you can finance something in 6 months and then it can collapse, and then you can spend 7 years funding something and it happens, but you've spent so much time that actually it doesn't have really the business effect. And I think that what's being said around Europe is that funding production companies, funding producers in their vision and strategy allows these companies to grow and be more independent and be more versatile. So I think there are options that can be introduced in the kind of policy-making regulations based on, for example, media programs that can help this diversity and this long-term game, because we are in this for a long time, right? It's not just to make one film.
I don't know if I have like some super creative solutions. I think that's what often we do, and pointing out the importance of Creative Europe Media, I absolutely agree with. For me and my company, getting the Minislate support has been a very solid base for being able to focus on development and not just go per project in the cycles of national funding, which is great to complement with, but like to have a longer horizon than 6 months or 1 year, when is the cycle of the national funding going, I think is very, very important, especially since Czech Republic is still relatively cheaper than other countries, but the amount of Creative Europe Media is the same. So it's still for us a generous amount to work with. The change in the Creative Europe rules, that there is like separation of low capacity countries, etc., makes it, I think, even more accessible, although the competition is growing, I think, exponentially. I don't know if there is what is the limit. And for me also, diversifying my slate was a thing I realized that I'm doing, although I always thought that I just want to do personal art house drama films, but I realize I can also feel something towards other genres and other formats. So I'm now developing a first drama series. I did documentary series with the public broadcaster, with Czech television, and I'm talking about, as a minority co-producer, about a project which is a Christmas story animation for kids with live action cats. So I realized, like, yeah, I would like to do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the key points is always be curious and updated about what's going on with the market, because, I mean, again, even more in US, to know what the flow. And usually it's good to attach actors and understand what actors, specific actors. Sometimes projects get made in US just because you have a big name that really wants to tell that kind of story. Once you have it, bring value to the project and bring financiers. For me as a producer, I mean, again, I understood the difference between US and Italy, but then I understood, and I partnered with Elina here from the Baltics to create co-production in Europe, because in Italy it's common to have co-production with France, Germany, but Baltics is not really explored, and I think it's a great country to create, and now they have the success with Flow and animation, like you said. But again, it's finding the story, but even to know how to pitch them. Because, for example, I have a project now, an Italian project that took many years. We got some funds in 2022, 2021. And now the director got success with a documentary that he just released by himself. He started with 15 copies, it became 400 copies. So I said, okay, now your feature film needs to be like in a docu-film style, which is not really, but in the pitch, the story, it is. So you need to be smart and understand how to talk, with financier, with bureaucracy, and yeah, again, adapt and dance, because in the end it's kind of, you dance with the music and to be a producer.
Because you said something very, very important that I forgot about. It's also about alliances, right? About finding the right alliances. And we discussed briefly the power of the network, but we all have networks. ACE is a great example. Czech Producers Association, PGA, Polish Producers Guild. So it's about creating and being kind of aware of what your network is and who are the people you want to work with, because I really believe that the time of solitary producer who does it everything by himself in the style of old American moguls is really, really gone. And it's about combining forces and being super agile and working with people that fit the project best, but also that fit your, sensibility best. And they don't have to be necessarily producers. They can be people who own post-production companies or actors that can elevate what you're working on. So alliances, I would also add to the table.
No, that's so true. And just I'm thinking about like the most maverick kind of American producers who exist now are even doing this now. Like someone like Christine Vachon's like always in Europe now, because it is so important. But on the alliances thing, it's quite interesting. And you two mentioned this earlier in the bigger session, is like sort of keeping the balance when you found partners that you work with. It's like, for example, Italy and the Baltics. This is something that didn't usually happen, but Italy is a cinema powerhouse. How can you as producers make sure that you're working on an equal footing? Maybe even the crew is on an equal footing if it's a mixed crew. Like how can you maintain like equality across cultures?
I think that when there are resources. Human, creative, financial, combined from various backgrounds, it's bound to be uneven, and something like justice would probably not be a good thing to look for. It may generate absurdities or like contradictions, but I think what we spoke about earlier was that we don't, or I don't look at like the rules or the formal elements of a possible collaboration, but it's always the human element is the most important. So if you find the right partners and you share a vision about a project, then there will most probably be ways to make it work, combining countries, smaller capacity, higher capacity, and making it work in an efficient way for that certain vision. I think sharing the vision and agreeing on it together is what makes things happen.
I think it's also about, and it's going to sound very simple, but it's not. It's to work with good people, like people who are genuinely honest and who can understand different, labor laws, or can just see that the project is not only about squeezing the maximum out of the financing, but rather it's about putting a story on a screen. And again, it's maybe a banal thought, but it really is important, and it has proven in my career as a right choice, to work with people you trust and who really share the same ethical perspective on the film industry, because there are a lot of people there who are out there to chase the big success, and they will do it at any cost. And for me, that's unacceptable. I mean, there are limits and there are borderlines I wouldn't cross, which means I will not make certain types of films, and that's okay. I think integrity and working with people with integrity is really important to stay in the industry on equal or equitable terms, and also staying sane as well.
Yeah, for me, my experience was working with many different producers in US and Italy. I worked with Christine Vachon, and we were just at Tribeca. There was one talk with Christine, and someone asked her, how we can be like you? And she just answered, you should have been born in 1960, 70, because it was another New York, and you were able to make certain projects with Todd Eyes and people to grow together. And I remember when I worked with one producer, Michael Schoenberg, he told me, you should not work with Steven Spielberg, you should look for the next Steven Spielberg. Because I agree, you need to grow with these people and understand their vision, understand maybe to your gut, if there is the talent that if it's shape, you can help them to express and become the next maybe Paolo Sorrentino. And this is, I think, one of the key part of being a producer, and at the same time navigating the landscape, understand what works now, how to sustain yourself, and maybe open up to new, in Italy we have a big business of comedy, which is not really in my
Your thing.
You might think, but at the moment you keep growing with a company, you understand, okay, I need to even find ways to cash flow and other stuff. So you need to be open, and you learn by doing. Like you said, recently just realized that money is part of that. But I believe, and I don't want to mention too many people, but I remember Dino De Laurentiis used to say, when I went to America, I understood I need to understand the system, but I need to keep my being Italian, because it's unique. And I think for all of us, from Czech Republic, from Poland, the unicity is to be who you are, but still understand the system that you play with.
I think you've all sort of mentioned an aspect of learning or understanding money or the system that you're working in. How did you do it? Like, what were the actual things that you did? Like, what were you studying to understand the industry that you work in? Genuine question.
I'm a lawyer by training.
Me too.
I study sociology, so I study high school electricity. Nobody honestly believed that I was going to do university. I did it, sociology, and I did a thesis on a report of Merrill Lynch about how the movie and finance can work together. And I started, okay, I love these things, and I love, the diplomacy, let's say, of being a producer. And I started from the bottom, and then little by little you learn, and you understand this belongs to you, and you keep on to grow and find a way to sustain. But yeah, you need to find an angle that it's really you inside of this craziness, which is the movie business.
No, I mean, I am a lawyer by training, but I studied, my first area of study was film studies, and that's where I sort of fell in love with the cinema. But since I come from a family of let's say, legal heritage, it was somehow expected I will also graduate from law school, which I did after 13 very long years. But I have to say it has proven to be super useful, because if you want to be in this business, and I don't know, deal with public financing or deal with private equity money, you have to understand the legal terms of it. You have to understand the idea of copyright, of intellectual property, etc. So that's super helpful. But when I was getting into the business, what helped me understand the type of business I'm getting to is, sessions like this one, panels, training. I think one of the first trainings I went to was a media-sponsored training in Warsaw with Katriel Shori, at that time head of Israeli Film Institute, who was there, and he gave this lecture on guerrilla-style filmmaking, and I was like, oh my God, I understand what I'm supposed to do now. So I think it's also the openness, and reaching out to people and seeking advice, maybe looking for, if you want to get into this industry and learn it, especially these days, maybe to team up with a company that's maybe slightly more up in their development. A milestone for me was 10 years ago when I worked with Ed Guiney and Andrew Love at Element Pictures, when they were just on the brink of their big international success with Lobster. I was a trainee in that company for 4 months, and I saw a very modern, forward-thinking European production house that then helped me shape the structure of Ship's Boy. So there are ways to learn and to understand it, and then at the end, nobody knows anything anyway. So yeah.
So for me was I always wanted to do something in film, and it took me a while to figure out how to pass the entry exams to film school. So meanwhile I did law as well, and that helps a lot actually in understanding not just in the film industry but in many other things. At the same time it kind of deforms the thinking, which I'm not always happy about, but yes, a lot of concepts are more clear. And then throughout the first years, but like ongoing years as well, I always found extremely valuable sharing with peers, with other producers, especially on an international level, because it like takes you out of the echo chamber of your own, but also of your own market. So EAVE and ACE producers were especially excellent platforms and like spaces to learn from, and I feel that like I'm a big fan of Banal and of like simplicity So just simply talking to other colleagues and friends and finding out how they do things and realizing that we have this in common, maybe this not, we do this differently or so. There is no formula, it's always different, but at the same time, this kind of mutual inspiration is really, really, I think, the way to go and very valuable.
I think the tail end of the talk earlier, you guys obviously spoke about burnout and working, the work levels that you have to have in this industry. And right now you're all talking about the sort of extra work beyond being a producer that you have to do to be a producer. So I wondered if you could talk sort of like kind of specifically about things you do in your life to control or contain your work life and have a somewhat sustainable balance, and which allows for the longevity that you have all had in your careers.
Look, okay. The least tired. The least tired, yeah. So definitely, I mean, I started my career in physical production, which could be a drug, because many people working on a movie set, they are just addicted of working on a movie set, but it really can destroy you, you know. 12, 15 hours standing up, or all the excitement, which is cool. But then, anyway, I understood early on that my path is to keep learning and then opening my company, be independent, blah, blah. So, yeah, protect yourself is key, mentally and physically, because this, I mean, in US you work 15 hours, it's too much. You get paid for that, but you don't have a life. And I think after the COVID, they realize all of this, and then the new rules with the union, which are making a bit difficult to shoot there. Now this is why they are coming all over Europe, Hungary, Poland, and but the crew start understanding that it's not just about work. Even if living in places like US, where you don't really have health insurance unless you pay for that, and being independent or freelancer could be difficult. Anyway, all the system is based in a way that you need to work and make money. But for me, I try to keep my growing as a person and growing as a producer on the same path, because I saw, people. I don't know. I don't want to give my life for work. I just want to enjoy it, which is difficult for sure. But you need to find space. And I used to meditate, or sometimes isolate myself, go somewhere else. I mean, I don't want to get into details and too spiritual, but I think to understand that everything it's temporary, and then if you can protect. I mean, one thing is to say when you go. One thing is when you are in the middle of a drama. Of course, it's different, but you always need to take a step back, look from everything from outside, and say, okay, how can I fix this? And sometimes talking with a director, that for them that's the most important things in the world, when it's, in the end it's a movie that hopefully someone going to watch. Anyway, but yeah, protect yourself, it's key, even because then you are able to help other people. If you don't help yourself, it's not possible.
There's more things I have been thinking of while listening to you now. One of them is like, yes, this like sharing, even if just like talking to someone in your office, ideally someone who works with you and not someone like who is not concerned with that. But yeah, sharing it like literally the workload, but also emotionally, just talking to your colleagues, to your closest, is very helpful. I find it also what you mentioned, like physically keeping yourself healthy, I think is very important, and to have some kind of other activity where like you do something with your body, I think for me personally is very good. I have started since COVID practicing Krav Maga, and I think it's good to have something like to do, like to separate from the rest of our work, to do something completely different, which like takes away your mind and body. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned you picked up Krav Maga in COVID, because I started sailing in COVID, which is my getaway from the reality of filmmaking. And I have to say that I'm choosing very exotic in terms of cold, unreachable northern waters to sail, which is great because there's absolutely no internet there, and I'm offline for 3 weeks, and that clears the head. But I think it's really important, being somebody who has experienced burnout, I think it's important to really pay attention to signals and to be aware that, you know, as you rightly said, it's only a movie, and we are not heart surgeons. Nobody is saving any lives here, maybe saving some egos, but none of them are worth saving. And I think it's really important to pay attention to signals, and when your friends tell you you should probably take a rest, you should probably take a rest, rather than trying to continue and go on. And I think this is the truth that people don't really face, or because it's very scary truth, but the world will continue without us. It's like nothing will end, your career won't end if you're not there for 3 months. It's not the end of the world, and really protect yourself in terms of give yourself time to rest, give yourself space to do other activities, but also, because this also sounds like this sort of, you know, how to say it, like mentally washing, like you can do it, etc. Of course, there's huge need for support from external systems, from, I don't know, public institutions that support your local industry, to actually acknowledge that you cannot, you know, endlessly provide new paperwork for something, or that they acknowledge that, okay, there was a total mess in this project, but we are here to help you to sort it out. I mean, it's not about us solving every issue. There also has to be an environment that provides for that. And a very practical solution, what we did in our film industry, after 3 years of negotiations with the workers union, casting directors union, actors union, etc., 16 organizations signed this memorandum of how we want the work on set to look like that you can't really go overtime, that you shouldn't work on Sundays and Saturdays if possible, and that also applies to production, not only to the physical crew, but to people who are in the production office. They also have time not to answer emails and phone calls. And I think finding these solutions, systematic solutions, is really, really important to not only to change our approach and, you know, meditate, which I find super useful, but also enforce solutions that then allow you to have a better work-life balance.
Can I just add to it? What you're saying is very good, that it needs a systemic solution, and I think both on individual and systemic level, it needs a certain kind of courage to do that, to say it out loud and do it. And for example, like on an individual level, not work, like because I think there is a lot of pressure for success and a lot of FOMO for producers. I think constantly we want to be there, we want to do that, and so on. But as you're saying, like it's eventually only a film, and life will go on even if we don't travel elsewhere or so. And I keep thinking of what my mentor from EAVE, Ankica Juric-Tilic, a great producer I admire, she said that she, over her career, never met anyone who would look back and say, I wish I had worked more, which I think is very wise to keep in head. And on the infrastructure level, I think there should be more and more initiatives to really describe and name what kind of conditions we have on sets, but also on a long term in the work of producers, and what we want and what we don't want. And then eventually it applies to like whole society, but I think it's the necessary effort.
No, it's interesting now hearing you all speak. It's like, I think the ambiguity in the role of a producer really continues this sort of lineage of like doing everything and working to death. And I feel like maybe that's something that was like structurally like maintained, like ambiguity was like maintained for that reason, you know. It's like if you don't really know what you do, you can do everything all the time. But talking about working with people and creating these structures, who should people be thinking about and speaking to? Who can be useful? You know, is it the film academies? Is it governments? Is it, you know, unions?
I think it's really everyone. I mean, it's if we want. I mean, again, referring to EAVE mentors, Lise Lense-Müller, who was my group leader, and she's now the head of studies at EAVE. She says something like, "Stop saying that the industry needs to change, because you are the industry, and you are the ones who are making the industry the way it is." And I couldn't agree more. I mean, of course, we should start with ourselves and how we approach our work, but also unionizing, forming alliances between the guilds of, you know, producers, directors, writers, and then trying to lobby people in power, the decision makers, and influence that. And I think also basically accepting that we can shape the world. I know it sounds so naive, but we can. And I do believe that if we are there, we stand up by our principles, and we want the reality to change through, for example, change of law, this can happen. Being knowledgeable how system works allows us to change them, basically. So.
We didn't speak about this before, but oh God, that's some heavy rain. It was all the talk of, like, yeah, you know.
No, it's not that bad.
I'm going to leave some time for questions. So if you have any questions, get thinking. But we didn't speak about this before, but it just made me, hearing you all talk, it made me think, like, in the US context, like, it is kind of really under threat in a serious way because of, you know, because of politics. And we spoke about Slovakia earlier in the earlier session, and this is kind of an off the top question, but I wondered, like, has the last year or so with Donald Trump, obviously, affected the way that you work at all?
Yeah, I need to go back to US soon, so.
Oh yeah, it's recorded, so maybe don't answer.
No, I'm an American citizen as well. I'm Italian, but American citizen, so I shouldn't have any issue. But yeah, what can I say? That, I mean, a few months ago, he just came up with a possible tariff with shooting abroad, and nobody knew how that thing was working. And I think the problem now with almost everything, it's even how the news and media reports all of this. Because definitely, everyone in charge, politician, or specifically him, they can change every day. They change what they say, and you don't really know what's going on. But of course, that had an impact on financiers, because at that point, I remember I had a call with a PGA the day after, and okay, what's going on? What we can do? And the first thing was, okay, financier, they don't want to jump in a territory that it's unknown before, even more now, because you don't know what's going to happen. And the movie needs to cost 30% more, even than what is now the actual price. So it's an unknown territory in our field every day, but even more now. And in US, I mean, we had big events with the strikes, with the wildfire in LA, that had really a big impact on the movie industry. Now in California, they just activated a new tax credit, New York, but it's all tied together, yes, with the political system as well, and we need to take into account this. So this is why maybe part of the reason even why movies get now made more in Europe, Spain, or East Europe, and I think this is enough for now.
Thank you.
No, but if we revert also to this case of Slovakia, right? I mean, this is not something that's happening only in the US. I mean, in US it has the most influence on the industry because that's where the heart of the industry is. But when you look at, you know, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, not so long ago, that there is this shift really in the policy and the policy approach to culture. And again, I'm not being naive saying, oh, you know, go and influence politicians and everything will be okay. We have to find solutions around it because sometimes the protests or being reactive is just not enough. And I think it's also about setting up maybe new frameworks of working, maybe trying to set up, you guys do it amazingly in the US, trying to set up support from private equity, for example, to invest in films, or different approaches to where we put our films, right? The different approaches to format, to be agile in a way, because sometimes reality cannot be changed in a short term. It takes much longer, but we want to be producing today. So I think it's also about being open to, for example, working with different formats, or not being offended that your film is not going to be screened in cinemas, but actually is going directly to the platform where it has a chance to be financed and be seen. So the agility, really, of adapting ourselves is essential.
I think, just adding to this, in the Central Eastern European region, it's obviously disturbing to see how situation can get worse very quickly in terms of funding for culture and the perception of culture. And I think, for example, it would be helpful to be agile in co-productions in terms of lowering or adjusting like the spending requirements. For example, it could also be much more environmentally sustainable if there wouldn't need to be just like the bureaucratic necessity for spending 50%, 80, 150, you name it, and it could be just much more natural to the needs of a certain project and a certain team.
But if I can add to that, and this is a hearsay because I can't remember which regions are these, but I've heard of, I think, German regions that have this reciprocity rule. So they, for example, support a project from another region, but you don't have to spend the money in that region. You can spend it in your region, so it's more sustainable, less travel, less costs. But then in the kind of reciprocal way, the other region supports a project from the first one. So there are solutions. I mean, we can be creative in how we shape this reality we're in, that it's actually better and more sustainable and more kind of protective also of what's important in the filmmaking.
Awesome. We've got like 5 minutes left. So does anybody want to?
Hi, since we have 3 producers here, I'd like to take this chance to ask you something regarding the scenario nowadays on a worldwide scene, indeed. Regarding the role of the OTT and the streamers, which I would say for medium budget has become quite prominent now when it comes to private investment. I'm not talking specifically about the European model that is very much relying on public funding. So how has this dominance of the streamer affected your work, the way you work? How have you adapted to that? And if you think this is going to stay or it can change? For instance, YouTube is becoming a big player. There is a case in India of a big star who decided to refuse Netflix and going from the box office, from the theatrical to YouTube. I think it's very interesting. So I'd like to have your opinion about this, please.
Well, so here in the Czech Republic, it's quite a relevant topic of these days because we have had a new law, audiovisual law, in effect since January 1st, and the new audiovisual law. And finally, it's like always one step, naturally one step behind the reality, so it's catching up with the reality of streamers and SVOD. And so from now on, the streamers will have to send part of their income from the territory, and it will be to the budget of the audiovisual fund. And I won't go into too many details, but they will be able to choose how much of that part will be direct investment or going to the fund's budget. I cannot tell you now how the reality will be because this is the year it's only starting. So from next year, it will actually be the first sample of the new budget. But the hope is that it will open up new opportunities for local independent production. That would be the optimal. And maybe there will be, we will still need to figure out like the right ratio, maybe amendments, etc. But I think that's like that should be the general care of our industry, to not think that things will be ideal from now on and we don't need to scrutinize it again.
I think it's very much about a healthy ecosystem. And as long as it's in balance, these players are here, they really spend enormous amounts of money on their original content. But I do believe they have to contribute to, let's say, the general system of audiovisual support. Because also from like business perspective, there are so many films or projects that should be made because they carry artistic value or traditional value or whatever values that are not so essential for a market-driven, audience-focused company. And I believe in the power of data and also in being very straightforward and acknowledging that, yes, let's say art house cinema or children's cinema that I love doing is a niche cinema. But it's essential, it exists, because without Mumblecore, you will not have Barbie. If Greta Gerwig didn't do her little tiny independent films, she would never have done Barbie. And that's it. I mean, there is in this again healthy ecosystem, there's this circularity, right? That you can grow new talent, you can experiment, you can be more radical, you can grow audiences, and then these bigger players can kind of get from that pool talents to make TV shows or reality game shows or whatever they want to produce. But I believe that in the last few years, we all became more aware of that. I had the pleasure of working with Netflix 4 or 5 years ago, and that was the best experience I had. But I know that also they have changed in terms of the content they wanna produce. So I feel that if they contribute to our existing systems, and we are all benefactors of that, it will all work well for all of us rather than just, segments of the market.
Yeah, talking about Netflix, I remember when I moved to New York in 2010, and it was just at the beginning of their journey, incredible journey. I was amazed because every time I went back home, there was my tenant I was living with. She always locked in the room watching these streamers. And I was thinking, what's going on? Why? I mean, she's working a lot, and then I start to get to learn about Netflix, and now, I mean, the fact that they got into this system so early on, and so many data they have, and the structure, and now they are getting into sport live events, so they need to sustain. And a few years ago, there was a big competition with all new streamers, Peacock, Apple, Amazon, and then little by little, you understand that it will be just kind of going back to the origins, because now they're offering in the US bundle TV that before was channel, now it's internet. But I noticed that in the market, so before there was, I mean, usually indie projects were packaged even through foreign sales, and there was a time when these streamers start to come on the market. The foreign sale was, at least in US, not anymore the thing, and now it's coming back. The reality with the US is that with the new rates and for the crew, it's quite expensive. So for example, in New York now, unless you are Apple, Amazon, New York, it's not easy to film there, because city like New York, Rome, I think, I don't know if Berlin or other, they know that when the movie comes, they expect money, and it's a problem. I remember when early on I did Bond in Italy, Spectre, and we had the head of department coming from, big project, and they always thought, oh, pay the location, pay this. And we said, but we need to come back with our Italian movies. We cannot apply the same system, which is something that needs to take in account. And yeah.
You also mentioned YouTube, and I think this is something we probably don't have time to get into. But I think it's, again, a part of our job as producers to be aware that actually YouTube user-generated content creators economy is now a growing part of the market. And maybe our role, again, will have to be redefined as people who either scout for talents there or maybe promote our projects there in a more, original, creative ways. I generally believe that the reality is now completely different. We don't know what it will be, and it's both scary and intriguing. So yeah, anything can happen, and also good things can happen, if anything can happen.
One more question, if anybody has it. I will say on that point, I was interviewing a filmmaker recently, and we were talking about this changing, shifting world. And she said something to me that I thought was really interesting, which is maybe good to end on. She was like, you know, I love Spotify, but I still love the orchestra. And there's always going to be people who love the orchestra. So I think even if it's changing, there's always going to be worth in the traditional idea of the art form, I hope.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Boop boop be doo.